Dr. Mae Linwood thought he was reaching for her hand, but when the outlaw grabbed his knife, she reached for her pistol, and now the whole county wants her head. Dust devils danced across the parched earth as Dr. Mae Linwood surveyed redemption. The town, a scattering of sun-baked buildings clinging to the promise of prosperity, was her domain. Her clinic, a humble structure smelling of antiseptic and wood smoke, was its heart. Me, with hands calloused from tending wounds and eyes that held both weariness and unwavering resolve, was its lifeblood. She expertly stitched a gash on young Billy's arm, a souvenir from a tumble in the creek. "Hold still now," she soothed, her voice a balm against his whimpers. Such small moments filled her days, a constant stream of ailments and injuries that demanded her attention. A cough, a fever, a broken bone, each a thread in the tapestry of redemption's survival. Me was more than a doctor. She was a confidant, a counselor, a pillar of strength in a land where both were scarce. Her dedication stemmed from a past she rarely spoke of, a past that had taught her the value of every breath, every heartbeat. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple as a riderless horse galloped into town, its saddle empty and stained crimson. A hush fell over redemption. Me felt a prickle of unease, such sights rarely boded well. Moments later, a figure stumbled into view, barely clinging to life. He was young, gaunt, and bleeding from a gunshot wound to the gut. Two men helped him toward me's clinic. "Doc, you gotta help him," one pleaded, his face etched with worry. Me hesitated. The man reeked of gunpowder and desperation. But the Hippocratic oath echoed in her mind, a promise she couldn't ignore. "Bring him inside," she directed, steeling herself. "Quickly now." The outlaw, barely conscious, was placed on her examination table. His eyes fluttered open, revealing a flicker of pain and defiance. "Help me," he rasped, his voice thin and weak. Me worked quickly, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She cleaned the wound, the outlaw groaning under her touch. As she probed for the bullet, his eyes snapped open, his grip tightening on her wrist. "Where am I?" he demanded, his voice stronger now, laced with suspicion. "You're in redemption," Me replied calmly, trying to dislodge his hand. "I'm Dr. Linwood, you've been shot." His gaze darted around the room, landing on the instruments glinting in the lamplight. "Don't try anything," he snarled, his other hand reaching inside his coat. "I'm trying to save your life," Me countered, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "But if you don't cooperate—" He lunged, a hidden knife flashing in his hand. Me reacted instinctively, grabbing a nearby scalpel. A brief, desperate struggle ensued. In the chaos, the scalpel found its mark. The outlaw slumped back, his eyes wide with shock, then glazed over. Silence descended upon the clinic, heavy and suffocating. The sheriff, a weary man named Brody, arrived at the clinic, his face grim. He surveyed the scene, the lifeless outlaw, the blood-stained floor, Me's pale face. "What happened here, Doc?" he asked, his voice low. Me recounted the events, her voice trembling slightly. Brody listened intently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he sighed. "He was wanted," Brody said, "for robbery and murder, but that ain't the half of it." He paused, then dropped the bombshell. "That man, that was Jesse Blackwood, Silas Blackwood's only son." The name hung in the air, heavy with dread. Silas Blackwood was a name whispered in fear throughout the territory, a ruthless land barren with a vast empire and a reputation for merciless vengeance. Me's blood ran cold. She hadn't just killed an outlaw, she had ignited a war. The implications were devastating. Redemption was now a target. News of Jesse Blackwood's death and Me's involvement spread through Redemption like wildfire. Fear replaced the usual small-town gossip. Faces that had once greeted her with smiles now turned away in apprehension. Whispers followed her down the dusty streets. "She's brought the Blackwood curse upon us, Mrs." Henderson muttered to a neighbor as Me passed. The townsfolk, already struggling with drought and hardship, saw Blackwood's wrath as an insurmountable threat. A meeting was called in the town square, voices rising in panic. Some demanded me leave, fearing her presence would invite certain destruction. Others, those whose lives she had touched, spoke in her defense, reminding everyone of her selfless service. But fear was a powerful motivator. The community was fracturing, torn between loyalty and self-preservation. Me watched, her heart heavy, knowing she had inadvertently placed them all in grave danger. The weight of their fate pressed down on her. That night, as a storm raged outside, Brody visited me at her clinic. "You should go, Me," he urged, his voice barely audible above the wind's howl. "Before Blackwood comes, I can't protect you, not from him." Me looked at him, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "And what about the others, Brody? What about Sarah with her ailing heart, or old man Hemlock with his broken leg? Who will care for them if I leave?" Brody sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "They understand the risk, Me. They'd want you safe." "Maybe," Me conceded, "but I can't abandon them." "I made a promise, Brody, a promise to heal and to help. I can't run now, not when they need me most." She knew the danger was real, perhaps insurmountable, but the thought of leaving her patients to face Blackwood's wrath alone was unbearable. Her decision was made. She would stay and face whatever came. With dawn came a new sense of purpose. Me, joined by Brody and a handful of loyal townsfolk, Caleb, the blacksmith, Martha, the resourceful shopkeeper, and young Billy, eager to prove himself, began to prepare for the inevitable. They barricaded windows, reinforced doors, and gathered what weapons they could find: old rifles, hunting knives, even sharpened gardening tools. Martha inventoried the supplies, carefully rationing food and water. Caleb began forging makeshift armor from scrap metal. Me, in addition to tending to her patients, organized a makeshift infirmary in the church, gathering bandages, herbs, and what little morphine she had left. She taught the others basic first aid, preparing them for the coming battle. The air was thick with tension, but also with a newfound sense of camaraderie. They were a small town, facing an impossible threat, but they would face it together. Hope flickered amidst the fear, fueled by Me's unwavering determination. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the setting sun. They rode slowly, deliberately, their faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats. Brody squinted, recognizing the lead rider's distinctive build. "Bounty hunters," he growled. "Blackwood sent a message." The riders stopped just outside town, their leader dismounting. He was a burly man with a scarred face and cold, dead eyes. "Dr. Linwood," he called out, his voice raspy. "Silas Blackwood sends his regards. He wants you alive, but he ain't particular about the rest of you." A tense silence followed. Then, without warning, the bounty hunters opened fire. The townsfolk returned fire from behind their barricades. The first wave of the siege had begun. Bullets whizzed through the air, kicking up dust and splintering wood. The fight was on. Redemption's fate hung in the balance. The skirmish was brief but brutal. The townsfolk, though outnumbered and outgunned, fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Brody, despite his age, moved with surprising agility, picking off the bounty hunters with well-aimed shots. Caleb's makeshift armor proved effective, deflecting several bullets. Martha, surprisingly, wielded a rifle with deadly accuracy. But the bounty hunters were relentless. Young Billy took a bullet to the leg, crying out in pain. Mrs. Henderson was grazed by a bullet, collapsing in shock. Me, dodging gunfire, rushed to their aid, her medical bag clutched tightly in her hand. She quickly assessed their injuries, barking orders to the others. "Bandages, water, get them to the church." The wounded were carried to the makeshift infirmary, where Me began to work feverishly, stitching wounds and administering what little pain relief she had. The battle was far from over, and the wounded were already piling up. The siege had just begun, and redemption was already bleeding. The church became a scene of chaos. Wounded men groaned, women sobbed, and children cried. Me moved from patient to patient, her face etched with exhaustion. Billy's leg wound was severe, requiring immediate attention. But Mrs. Henderson was fading fast, her breathing shallow. Me knew she couldn't save both. A wave of nausea washed over her. This was the nightmare she had always feared, the impossible choice between two lives. She looked at Brody, his eyes pleading. "Who me?" he asked softly. "Who do we save?" The weight of the decision threatened to crush her. She thought of Billy's youthful spirit, his eagerness to help. Then she looked at Mrs. Henderson, a kind woman who had always offered a warm smile and a helping hand. Time was running out. Me closed her eyes, her heart aching. She had to choose. A doctor's oath demanded she save every life possible, but tonight that was an impossible promise. As Me tended to Billy, a wave of memories crashed over her. She saw herself as a young girl, watching helplessly as her younger sister succumbed to a fever. The doctor had been too late, too ill-equipped. That day, she had vowed to dedicate her life to healing, to preventing others from experiencing the same pain and loss. But now here she was, facing the same impossible situation. Had her actions, her decision to defend herself against Jesse Blackwood, condemned these people? Was she responsible for their suffering? Doubt gnawed at her, threatening to unravel her resolve. She remembered her sister's frail hand in hers, the desperate plea in her eyes. It was that memory, that unyielding desire to save lives, that fueled her. She couldn't give up, not now. She had to keep fighting for redemption, for her patients, for her sister, and for herself. The ground trembled. A cloud of dust billowed on the horizon, growing larger with each passing moment. The drumming of hooves echoed through the valley, a relentless, ominous sound. Brody, his face grim, climbed to the top of the church steeple, peering through his binoculars. "It's him," he announced, his voice tight with dread. "Blackwood. And he's brought an army." Me felt a cold dread wash over her. She raced outside, joining the others. A seemingly endless line of riders stretched across the plains, their faces hard, their weapons glinting in the sun. Blackwood, an imposing figure on a black stallion, led the charge. They were completely surrounded. Escape was impossible. Blackwood had sealed their fate. The final confrontation was at hand. Redemption was about to face its darkest hour. The odds were stacked against them. Caleb the blacksmith stepped forward, his face resolute. He raised a white flag, fashioned from a bedsheet and a broom handle, and walked slowly towards Blackwood's approaching army. "I'll try to reason with him," he said to me, his voice barely a whisper. Maybe there's still a chance." He approached Blackwood, his voice trembling but firm. "Mr. Blackwood," he called out, "we're just simple folk here. We don't want any trouble. Dr. Linwood acted in self-defense. Your son attacked her." Blackwood stared down at Caleb, his eyes like chips of ice. "Self-defense?" he sneered. "My son was wounded helpless. She murdered him in cold blood." "Oh, Caleb pleaded, "We're willing to offer you anything, money, land, just spare our town." Blackwood laughed, a cold, heartless sound. "Spare you? You harbor a killer, justice will be served." He signaled to his men, "Take him." Caleb was seized, dragged back towards the army. Blackwood's message was clear. There would be no negotiation, no mercy, only vengeance. Blackwood's men unleashed a relentless barrage of gunfire. Bullets ripped through the air, shattering windows and tearing holes in the barricades. Me, her face grim but determined, directed the defense. She knew redemption like the back of her hand, every alleyway, every hidden passage, every weakness in its defenses. "Martha, take the children to the root cellar," she shouted. "Brody, cover the east entrance. Billy, stay down and reload." She used her knowledge of the town's water system to flood the main street, creating a muddy obstacle for the advancing riders. She had Caleb set up tripwires connected to noisemakers, alerting them to enemy movements. She even used her medical supplies to create makeshift smoke bombs, disorienting the attackers. The townsfolk fought bravely, inspired by Me's leadership and her unwavering belief in their ability to survive. They were outgunned, outmanned, but not outsmarted. The siege had begun, and redemption would not go down without a fight. As night fell, Blackwood's men attempted to breach the church, hoping to capture Me and the wounded. But Me had anticipated this. She and Brody had rigged the church's bell tower with a system of ropes and pulleys connected to a pile of heavy rocks on the roof. As the first wave of attackers broke through the front doors, Mae gave the signal. Brody pulled the lever and the rocks came crashing down, crushing the attackers and collapsing the entrance. A collective cheer erupted from the townsfolk. The setback was significant. Blackwood's men, momentarily stunned and demoralized, retreated. The victory, though small, was a much-needed boost to Redemption's morale. For the first time since Blackwood's arrival, hope flickered brightly. They had shown him they would not be easy prey. They could fight back. They could win. The momentary respite allowed me to tend to the wounded and rally the spirits of the remaining defenders, but she knew this was just a temporary reprieve. Blackwood would not be deterred. He would be back and he would be angrier than ever. True to her word, Blackwood returned with renewed fury. He had lost men and his pride was wounded. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. This time he wouldn't target the church directly. He would target their will to survive. The townsfolk awoke to the sickening sight of Blackwood's men poisoning the well, their only source of fresh water. A collective gasp of horror swept through Redemption. Mae rushed to the well, confirming their worst fears. The water was tainted, unusable. Desperation set in. Water was already scarce, and now their supply was poisoned. Mae knew they couldn't last long without it. Blackwood had tightened the noose. He was not just trying to kill them, he was trying to break them. He was trying to force them to their knees, begging for mercy, but Mae refused to let him win. She would find a way to survive, even in the face of such cruelty. She would not let Blackwood break Redemption. Desperate for water, Mae remembered a hidden spring located outside the town limits, a place she had kept secret for emergencies. But reaching it would mean crossing open ground, exposed to Blackwood's snipers. Brody volunteered to go. "I'm old, Mae," he said, his voice raspy. "I've lived a good life. It's my duty to protect this town." Mae protested, but Brody was adamant. Under the cover of darkness, he slipped out of Redemption, crawling through the dirt towards the spring. He managed to fill several canteens, but as he made his way back, a sniper spotted him. A shot rang out and Brody fell to the ground. Mae rushed to his side, but it was too late. He was gone. His sacrifice had bought them time, but at a terrible cost. Grief washed over Mae, mingling with her determination. Brody's death would not be in vain. She would honor his memory by saving Redemption, even if it cost her everything. The weight of her responsibility grew heavier. Fueled by grief and an unwavering determination to avenge Brody's death, Mae decided on a daring plan. She knew she couldn't defeat Blackwood's army in a straight fight. She had to use her wits, her knowledge, and her medical skills to gain an advantage. Under the cover of darkness, she slipped out of Redemption, carrying a small bag filled with her medical supplies. She made her way towards Blackwood's camp, avoiding the patrols. She knew Blackwood would be expecting an attack, but he wouldn't expect her to come alone, unarmed. Reaching the camp, she identified Blackwood's tent. She carefully laced a potent sleeping draught into his water supply, knowing he would drink it before retiring for the night. She then left a note, written in her most precise medical script, detailing the symptoms he would experience. It was a gamble, but it was her only chance. She was betting that fear, combined with her medical knowledge, would give her the upper hand. She was ready to face Blackwood on her terms. Mae waited in the shadows, watching as Blackwood emerged from his tent, his face pale and drawn. The sleeping draught had taken effect, leaving him weak and disoriented. He clutched his stomach, his eyes wide with fear as he reread Mae's note. Mae stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Silas Blackwood," she said, "it's over." Blackwood glared at her, his hand reaching for his gun. But his body betrayed him. He doubled over in pain, clutching his stomach. Mae approached him, holding a vial of antidote. "I can help you," she said, "but only if you call off your men. Let Redemption go free." Blackwood hesitated, his pride warring with his fear. He knew Mae held his life in her hands. He had underestimated her. He had thought her a simple doctor, but she was more than that. She was a survivor, a strategist, and a force to be reckoned with. The final showdown had begun. Blackwood, his face contorted with pain and rage, finally relented. He barked orders to his men, calling off the attack and ordering them to retreat. He snatched the antidote from Mae's hand and gulped it down. As Blackwood and his men rode away, a cheer erupted from redemption. They had survived. They had defeated a ruthless land baron and his army, but the victory was bittersweet. Brody was gone and the town was scarred. Buildings were damaged and the well was poisoned. Redemption would never be the same. The siege had tested their limits, revealing both their strengths and their weaknesses. But they had emerged stronger, more united. They had learned the true meaning of courage, sacrifice, and community. Mae watched them, her heart filled with a mixture of grief and pride. She had saved redemption, but at a great cost. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but they would face it together. They were survivors. They were redemption. Days turned into weeks. Mae worked tirelessly, tending to the wounded, helping to rebuild the damaged buildings, and searching for a new source of water. She often found herself thinking about Brody, about his sacrifice, about the difficult choices she had been forced to make. She knew she would never forget the events of the siege, the fear, the loss, the courage. But she also knew that she had done everything she could to protect redemption, to save its people. One evening, as the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Mae stood on the outskirts of town, surveying the landscape. The future was uncertain. Blackwood could return, new dangers could arise, but redemption had survived. And as long as she was there, as long as she had her skills and her determination, she would continue to fight for its survival. She was Dr. Mae Linwood, and this was her home. The future was uncertain, but redemption had survived.